Dear listener, welcome to the seventh story in the adventures of Sherlock Holmes, The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle. This is one of the most delightful, festive, and cleverly constructed tales in the entire canon. It is a perfect Christmas mystery that begins with a battered old hat and a fine goose, and quickly unfolds into a story of a stolen priceless jewel, a desperate thief, and one of Holmes's most elegant and compassionate solutions. Narrated by Dr. John H. Watson, the adventure takes us through the snowy, gaslit streets of London during the joyful season, where the air is filled with the scent of roasted chestnuts, pine, and goodwill. From the quiet comfort of 221B, Baker Street to the bustling Covent Garden Market and the humble home of a poor plumber, every worn hat, every crystal of ice on a feather, every tiny scratch on a magnificent blue stone, and every brilliant inference will unfold here in rich, vivid, and extended detail. Nothing of importance is left untold. Settle in as the Christmas bells ring faintly in the distance, and the game takes a wonderfully festive turn. The game is afoot, and this time, it comes with a goose and a blue carbuncle. Opening scene. A Christmas present from Peterson. It was the second morning after Christmas in the year 1890. A thick yellow fog still lingered over London, but inside 221B, Baker Street, the sitting room was warm and cheerful. The fire crackled merrily, casting a golden glow on the walls lined with books and chemical apparatus. I, Dr. John H. Watson, had called upon my friend Sherlock Holmes after a busy morning with patients. Holmes was lounging in his favorite armchair, wearing his purple dressing gown, his long thin form relaxed yet alert. The door opened, and the commissionaire Peterson entered, his face flushed with excitement. In one hand he carried a battered black felt hat, and in the other a fine, plump Christmas goose with a card still tied to its left leg. Peterson explained that the previous night, while walking home through Tottenham Court Road, he had witnessed a scuffle. A tall man carrying the goose under his arm had been attacked by a group of roughs. In the confusion, the man dropped both the goose and his hat and fled into the darkness. Peterson had picked up the items and, knowing Holmes's interest in curious problems, brought them straight to Baker Street. Holmes's eyes lit up with that familiar spark of intellectual excitement. "This is excellent, Peterson," he said. "A very interesting little problem indeed." He took the hat and turned it slowly in his hands, studying every detail with minute care. Holmes's brilliant deduction from the hat. Holmes began his famous analysis with quiet delight. The hat was of the very best quality, black felt, beautifully made, yet it was 3 years old and badly worn. The owner had not replaced it, which suggested he had once been prosperous but had since fallen on hard times. The size of the hat was unusually large, indicating a man of considerable intellect. The excellent quality of the lining showed that the owner had once been able to afford the best. There were signs of recent haircuts and the faint scent of lime cream, suggesting the man still took some care of his appearance. Most tellingly, the hat had been pierced for a hat securer, an elastic band to hold it on in the wind, but the elastic was missing and the holes were frayed. This showed that the owner had once been careful but had recently lost heart and no longer bothered about small matters of appearance. Small crystals of ice still clung to the hat, and a few goose feathers were stuck to the brim. Holmes concluded that the owner was a middle-aged man with grizzled hair that had been recently cut, who led a sedentary life, went out little, and was out of training. He also deduced that the man had a wife who had ceased to love him, and that he had recently taken to drink. Watson was astonished, as always, by the way Holmes could read so much from a single object. Holmes smiled, and added that the hat also told them the man was highly intellectual and had recently suffered financial difficulties. "It is a very pretty little problem," he remarked with satisfaction. The goose and the discovery of the blue carbuncle. Holmes then turned his attention to the goose. It was a fine, plump bird, beautifully white, with a card tied to its left leg that read, "From Mrs. Henry Baker." Peterson had already taken the goose home for his family's Christmas dinner, but Holmes suggested they examine its crop before it was cooked. When they opened the bird, they found something extraordinary inside, a magnificent blue stone, sparkling with a cold, pure, icy light. It was the famous blue carbuncle, a priceless jewel of extraordinary size and brilliance that had been stolen from the Countess of Morker's hotel room at the Hotel Cosmopolitan just a few days earlier. The theft had caused a great sensation in the newspapers. The police had arrested a plumber named John Horner, but Holmes was immediately convinced the real thief was still at large. The goose, therefore, had been cleverly used to smuggle the stolen jewel out of the hotel. Holmes placed an advertisement in the evening papers. Found a goose and a black felt hat. Mr. Henry Baker can have them by applying at 221B, Baker Street this evening. The arrival of Henry Baker that same evening As the gas lamps flickered in the foggy streets, a tall, gaunt man with a stoop and grizzled hair arrived at Baker Street. It was Mr. Henry Baker. He was overjoyed to recover his battered hat, though visibly disappointed when Holmes informed him that the original goose had already been eaten by Peterson's family. Holmes, in his generous Christmas spirit, gave him a fine fresh goose from Mrs. Hudson's kitchen as a replacement. Baker explained that he had bought the goose at the Alpha Inn near the British Museum. The landlord there ran a goose club every Christmas, where members paid a few pence weekly and received a bird at the festive season. Holmes asked for the exact address of the Alpha Inn and let Baker depart happily with his new goose. The trail leads to Covent Garden the next morning. Holmes and Watson visited the Alpha Inn. The landlord, a jovial man named Windigate, told them he had bought 24 geese from a salesman named Breckenridge in Covent Garden Market. They made their way to the bustling market, where the air was filled with the cries of vendors and the scent of fresh produce. They found Breckenridge, a burly man with a red face, arguing heatedly with a small man over some geese. Holmes questioned Breckenridge cleverly, pretending to bet that the goose Mr. Baker had received was country-bred, while Breckenridge insisted it was town-bred. The argument grew lively, and Breckenridge finally revealed that he had bought the geese from a country supplier named Mrs. Oakshott of Brixton Road. Holmes thanked him, and they left. As they walked away, Holmes remarked that the case was nearly solved. The visit to Brixton Road and the confession, they took a cab to Brixton Road and found Mrs. Oakshott, a stout woman with a sharp face and practical manner. She told them she had sold 24 geese to Breckenridge. When Holmes mentioned the Blue Carbuncle, Mrs. Oakshott became visibly nervous and denied knowing anything about it. Suddenly, a man rushed into the yard. It was James Ryder, the head attendant at the Hotel Cosmopolitan. He was pale, trembling, and clearly terrified. Holmes confronted him directly with calm authority. Ryder broke down and confessed everything. He had stolen the Blue Carbuncle from the Countess of Morker's room with the help of the plumber John Horner, whom he had cleverly framed for the crime. To hide the jewel quickly, he had forced one of his sister's geese, Mrs. Oakshott's, to swallow it. He had then taken what he thought was the right bird to sell at market. But in the confusion, he had picked the wrong goose. The bird containing the carbuncle had gone to the Alpha Inn and eventually to Henry Baker. Ryder begged for mercy, saying he had never been in trouble before and was driven by desperation. Holmes, showing his characteristic compassion during the Christmas season, let him go with a stern warning never to repeat such a crime. The innocent plumber John Horner was later released when the evidence against him collapsed. Closing narration and Watson's reflection, Holmes later explained the entire chain of reasoning to Watson with his characteristic clarity. The hat had given them the name and character of Henry Baker. The goose had led them to the Alpha Inn. The market trail had taken them to Breckenridge and then to Mrs. Oakshott. The appearance of James Ryder had completed the solution. The Blue Carbuncle was safely returned to the Countess of Morcar, and the case ended not with punishment, but with mercy and a chance for redemption. Watson reflected that this adventure beautifully showed Holmes's remarkable powers of deduction combined with his deep sense of justice and seasonal kindness. In the midst of a cold London winter, Holmes had solved a serious crime with wit and compassion, allowing a man to reform rather than face ruin. If your heart warmed at the Christmas goose, your mind raced with Holmes's deductions from a simple old hat, and you smiled at the festive and merciful ending, then Sir Arthur Conan Doyle has succeeded in creating one of his most charming and memorable short adventures. The Christmas bells may fade into the distance, dear listener, but the game,